Okay, I'll call this Plan Commission meeting for January 8th, 2018 to order. Roll call, please.
Chris Elmer.
Here.
Steve Kraus. Garen Hersberg. Here. Pat McGowan. Here. Brad Zeman. Here. Brian Malish.
Here.
Tim Black.
Okay, first item on the agenda is minutes. Look for approval. Motion by Brad.
I will second.
Second by Gary. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to address the commission on anything that's not on the agenda for this evening? Perfect. Okay. We'll move on from there. One quick thing, if you guys don't mind, if you have a chair in the middle, if you're willing to move in, because we may have some guests that join us, so we can just have them join in at the ends of the seats, if you're okay with that, that would be great. Just, it'll make it easier than having to try to traps through you on that.
Drops?
Traps, I don't know.
Traps.
Is that the right word, traps? I don't know if that's the right word, but we'll say it either way. So thank you for doing that right off the bat. And here's some come right now. See, we're perfect for what we just did. Okay? So the first item on the agenda for this evening is under new business, public hearing regarding the proposed project plan boundaries and creation of tax incremental district number 8. So we're going to have a presentation first.
Yeah, actually, Todd's going to give an introduction, and then we're going to turn over to a consultant to walk us through the project.
Okay?
And we'll follow that up with the public hearing.
Perfect.
And I think my task in particular is to introduce Mike. Mike Harrigan is with the village's financial advisory firm, Ellers & Associates. And the village has used Ellers for many years to assist with an array of different financial programs and projects, including whenever the village amends, creates, or otherwise spends any time whatsoever on TIF district creation. So he's been working with us on prior districts, and he's working with us on the proposed projects for proposed TID 8 and proposed TID 9. So Mike's going to walk through that. I think I'm going to let Mike get right into it, and then I'll kind of chime in, or staff will chime in as we go along, Mike, and tag team with you as needed. I'll try to bring up the project plan on the screen to give visuals for folks as we go through. All right, ready to go? Yep. And specifically, TID 8 is the downtown district, and Michael described those boundaries.
Thank you, Todd. Again, my name is Mike Harrigan, and I'm with the Ellers firm, and we assisted in the creation of this project plan document, which is required under state law whenever you do a project or a tax increment district. I guess we'd like to begin, and for those that have copies of the plan document in hand, I will refer to some pages here. This map happens to be located on page 8 of the project plan document. And what this map depicts is the boundaries of both the existing tax increment district number 5, which is the blue border area that's delineated on the map, and then the highlighted parcels with the parcel numbers on them represent the proposed creation of the new tax increment district number 8. This is a district that is being overlaid over the top of the existing tax increment district number 5, which was created a number of years ago. Now, within that district, when you create a tax increment district, what you're doing is creating a boundary within that district, and that there's a certain amount of value of property that exists within the district when it's created. And in our plan, we've got those parcels that are listed by number are indicated on a graph, table on page 12 of the project plan. And in that page, there's a specific listing of the addresses of all the properties and the acreage of each property and the existing value of each parcel, both land and improvements. Altogether, there's about 24 acres of land in that pink shaded area on the map. And the total value that exists there today is a little over $10 million. It's $10,133,000 of value. So when you create a tax increment district, on the date that it's created, and this district is allowed to stay in business for a maximum period of time. In this case, it's a rehabilitation district, so that means it's got a maximum potential life of 27 years. Well, during that 27-year period, the whole idea here is to create a plan that stimulates new development that would be unlikely to happen as proposed without the village's participation through this through the TIF program. When you create the district, as I said, it's got a value already, and that value has taxes that keep getting generated every year, and they continue to flow to the underlying taxing jurisdictions, just like always. So the village, the school district, the county, vocational district continue to get the money, as always, on that $10 million. But from the date of creation beyond, when we see new value in that area, through creation of new property, construction, or appreciation, that gets taxed just like all the other property in the village too, but those taxes are retained by the village for that period of time to pay for the project costs associated with this district, okay? So that's the fundamental way that this program works. Now, what's been envisioned here preliminarily is the potential development within that area, and currently there are 3 proposed areas that have developments that have been identified for those areas. One of them is very much further along than the other 2. But there's a map on page 19. I don't know if you can bring that one up, that map. Todd, that might be helpful here at this point. I'll just wait for a second for that map to show up here. Okay. So this map is reflecting 3 areas that are highlighted in a purple shading. And the areas that are depicted here, I've identified, and the center one is the one that is really the one that's most furthest along in relationship to the development plans and the identification of the game plan for the site. And that project is being undertaken and proposed by the Hovde Company. Some of you probably may be familiar with them because they are the ones that also did the new project across the street in that area. And so that mixed-use project is located there. This would be across the street. And within the project plan document here, we have several pages that have a site plan on it, pages 20 through about page 25, I believe it is, 24, are the various elevations and renderings of the proposed project. This is an overall rendering of the project that is proposed on this particular site, and altogether it's got approximately 101 units of residential along with retail on the ground floor of the project.
Just to make sure, Mike, that everybody's got their bearings here. This is Main Street, and Quick Trip is located right here. So if we're standing in the Quick Trip parking lot, you'd look straight across at it there. Traffic signals, Madison and Main Apartments, Madison Avenue, Main Street.
I'd also just point out one quick thing. Angus and Young does a very fine job. That is not a one-way street. It's 2 ways, okay?
Oh yeah, this isn't to scale. I mean, if you were to look carefully here, it doesn't look like there's room, but this is definitely not a to scale rendering.
So, and by the way, we do have the president of Hovde here this evening. Mr. Slavish is here, can answer questions if there are questions specific to this project. I'll have more to say on that one in a second. The other 2 projects, and if we could go back to the map, on page 19.
Oh, Mike, you are really down.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to put you through your pages now. Page 19. So the other 2 areas, we have the one on the far right. This is a 175-unit multifamily.
Far left.
I'm sorry, far left is a 175-unit multifamily, a project that has been brought to the village, and it's only at essentially conceptual level at this point by the T-Wall Corporation. We have a couple of site plans and map here. This is pages 25 and 26. But this is the site plan. It shows 3 buildings in 3 phases. The elevations call for a 4-story building, and the total number of units is 175 among all 3 buildings for this particular location. And the phases, I think, are on the prior page, and I guess you can read them on here, but it's phases 1, 2, and 3 that are laid out as such. The third project is the one that's on the far right on that map on page 19, and that one is proposed as a senior living project, and it is early enough in the process that the village has not yet received the conceptual plans for the site itself, but they've had preliminary conversations with the individuals for the site. I can tell you that when we were first engaged and brought into the project, the primary purpose of this district was really focused on the Hovde deal. And the village indicated that as long as we're looking at the overlay of this district, number 5, that from a planning perspective, it would be perhaps useful to take a look at all of the development opportunities in the area. So and that's why we've got the area laid out and included is here this evening. Now, what I'd like to do is talk about what's been projected thus far insofar as both the value of the new tax base that is proposed to be created by these 3 projects, as well as the costs that the village is being asked to consider, including to be paid for by this tax increment district. And then we'll take a look at how it projects out preliminarily from a cash flow standpoint to see whether this thing would pencil out.
Mike,
So-
if I could I just add a couple of things in between the purples in terms of what might be expected in terms of projects? And Mike's right, the center of the universe on this thing was the Hovde project. That initiated the TIF process, and staff always wants to take the opportunity to give the commission a chance to look at other options. One reason we created a broad district was that mid-process, you can't make the district larger because then you have to redo the whole hearing process. But it is feasible to constrain the size of the district mid-process. So that's why we sort of took this approach with our discussion. Mike pointed out the 3 potential residential components, but I'd like to also identify a couple areas of interest. I'm calling this the Hofbrau block. That's that large rectangle. There's a couple, 2 flats back here as well. That's an area that the village had identified in earlier plans for potential parking to serve all of downtown. So being that the Hofbrau house is currently for sale and in a potential process of acquisition, the notion of the village being a participant in that to solve some parking questions, parking concerns is feasible. So that's why we included that. Heading further east or west, this is the property where Millhouse Quilts is located. The owners of the Millhouse Quilts business have indicated a desire to make some pretty significant improvements to their property, including adding an elevator, adding access to other portions of the building, and even physically adding onto the building. So there's potential for some value increase on the property, and being one of our significant tourism driving businesses, the notion of incentive to support that project with some type of grant or loan or combination thereof is a potential public project we might want to consider. If you then jump to the south, the rest of the theme here relates to parking. This is Reeve Park. The Chamber Depot is there, and the rest of this is parking space. But the notion of making better use of that space, whether it means acquiring adjacent property or otherwise, that's an area to potentially enhance downtown parking. It's very central, so that's why we included that. And if you cross the street to this block, you've got an array of businesses. The meat market, for example, and that string of connected businesses all have backsides adjacent to the alley that are kind of hodgepodge private parking arrangements. And the notion that was identified about 10 years ago in a parking plan is questioned whether we could sort of collaborate across boundaries and come up with a good combined design of parking that could serve those businesses along with their customers. So that's a potential project there as well. The purples were all identified, as Mike had said. I would just note that the reason you see Waunakee Alloy or the future library site located here is that you couldn't have, the parcels all have to be contiguous to make a district. They have to all connect. So essentially, these two village parcels were used to connect the district to the Legion site, or what had potential for a senior housing development here. So these are included for no other purpose but to connect the district to the Legion site. So I think that's the grand scope there, Mike.
Okay. I'm going to next turn now to, in the plan, it's page 33, and that's a little table in the plan that identifies some estimated valuations.
Excuse me. Is there in mind that I can get a copy of all of this?
We just got updated versions. We just got updated versions today, and we can make them available. Tomorrow they'll be up.
Great, thank you.
So,
I'll do my best to zoom in here, Mike.
all right, so what we've got across the top, we've got these columns that I've identified, these different potential project areas. And there's the Hovde mixed-use project, the 175-unit multifamily, the 100-unit senior housing, and then further to the right, these other mixed-use and commercial improvements that Todd had made reference to as potential things that could develop as well. These are the estimated taxable, additional new taxable values, or if you will, the increase or increment value that would be created over and above what's out there today, if all these projects were to go. And so, if you look at the far corner on the far right there, the column, you'll see, go and just scroll down a little bit there. You'll see that the total adds up to a little over $49 million of additional value. And that's the new tax base that effectively would get taxed just like everybody else in town. But for the duration of the tax increment district, the taxes there that are generated by that would be captured to pay the costs of the project plan that are identified in here. So let's talk about what some of those costs are at this juncture and the structure of payment. Page 32, which is the prior page, has a set of numbers. Let's go to the top, and you'll see the projects listed across the top with the various categories, and then we go into the various phasing and the years that these would be financed. And in some cases, these are financed up front by the village with an actual borrowing, utilizing its general obligation borrowing authority. And that's primarily for the infrastructure costs associated with the development. The other costs are helping to fund some of the gap in the costs of financing the project associated with the development itself. And these would not be financed up front by the village, but instead are financed by the developer. And the taxes that are generated off the project are then scheduled to be paid in a note back to the developer over time to cover some of their costs, and they are referred to as municipal revenue obligations in this case. The first two columns are costs that are directly associated with the Hovde portion of this deal. And so if you go down, scroll down, Todd, to the bottom of that page, you'll see that there are totals. In the first case, because this is the first column is the one where the village is raising the cash up front for those infrastructure related costs. For land acquisition, for roadway, for utilities, and for road improvements. And then there's the associated costs of issuance. We'd be looking at a bond issue of $1,170,000 for that. The other associated costs are costs that the developer has that are related to their project. And the total is $4,763,306. associated with that, which would be paid in what's referred to as a municipal revenue obligation over a period of time. I'm going to show you how that looks in more detail as we walk through this. Now, as I say, those two columns are the two pieces of financing that relate directly to the HUBD program. The key to these things is to make sure that the projects themselves, the taxes that they're generating are going to be more than sufficient to cover the cost of any obligations that are incurred by the village. The other columns, as we walk across the page, are associated with some of the other projects. And we have, in 2019, utility roadway improvements that are currently proposed to be funded by, again, a general obligation issue, and then another developer-funded piece of municipal revenue obligation in 2019 for $1 million. In phase 2, we have, again, a land acquisition for public parking and parking improvements, which would be funded up front, and then an additional gap financing for the development, an additional $1 million. And then in the third phase, there are costs associated with utilities, roads, as well as, again, development gap financing. Altogether, the total cost, if you go over to the far right and to the bottom, you'll see that the bottom line here is about $13,688,000 of total cost. Those dollars have to be paid for by the increment that's generated. So if we take a look at, I'm going to go first to page 35.
Mike, could I add an element of introduction? I don't think you touched on enough so the public and the Plan Commission is fully aware. You reviewed it well with the Joint Review Board earlier today, but we do have a TIF district encompassing most of this today. And there's been some public questions about why do we need another TIF district where there's already a TIF district? Can you spend a little bit of time talking about the current district and why it is that we're even considering another one? Can we add that into introduction here?
Back of the document, which I was going to cover, but I'll be happy to cover right now. If we go back to the, if you recall the original map, the broader district was a district that we had established a number of years back, and it had a number of obligations associated with it that have to be paid. And we have, that's the blue border, the blue line is current boundary of tax increment district number 5. That district by law is required to terminate in 2032 at this point. And the problem here that we have is that the costs associated with these new developments that want to come in today are going to take longer to pay for than this district has time to pay for them. That's the fundamental reason why we're looking at a new district, an overlay district, because there's not enough time left under the law in the old district to cover the costs. We actually have spreadsheets in the plan on pages 38 and 39.
Do you want me to zoom into all
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
That's
let's-
pretty complex.
Well, let's at least go to the first one,
Okay.
page 38, just to show that we've looked at this. Because it's a good question. The question is, what's the impact on the old district if we create this new district? Does it suffer at all because of the fact that it's not getting any benefit here as a result of this thing? The new value? And you're gonna have to zoom in on this.
Yeah, tell me where.
Well, let's start on the far left and work our way around. Okay, so that first column is, now this is the existing tax increment district number 8, okay? And so the first column is telling us the dollars that are coming in from the district. So right now, there's enough value that's being generated in this district to generate $395,000 a year in property taxes. In addition, we have income coming from tax increment district number 2, which has been allocated to support and help the cash flow of this district. There's a little bit of state computer aid that comes in, and then that's our total revenue stream between all those sources gives us our revenue. The payments in that district are bonds that have been issued in the past, and these are the payments on those obligations. There was an 09 issue, 2011, and 2016. And if you scroll further to the right, you'll see that there are payment obligations to developers that did projects within this area as well, one of which was the former Hovde project. Total expenses are indicated in the column, and we have an outstanding negative balance that's being worked down with the cash flow coming from the district, such that it's projected by the year, and scroll down, Todd, if you would, now to the bottom here. By the year 2028, we expect that this district will have generated enough cash flow to completely cover all its costs and close effectively 6 years ahead of its permitted life under the law. So that's what's going on with the existing underlying district. What we forego when we create a new district is any appreciation on the new construction, or excuse me, on the existing value that's already in that district, so that we've got the $10 million going into the new district for base value. The appreciation on that $10 million will no longer accrue to this district here. And so we've calculated the impact of that. If you go to the next page, scroll down, you'll see that we still are able to close this district in the year 2028, but the ending balance shifts from about $700,000 versus, well, the net balance is the difference between the cumulative balance and the outstanding principal, which is about $300,000. With this change, that balance shrinks to about $80,000. So that's the only impact. We still close the same year, but there is just not quite as much at the back end in terms of fund balance. So to go back to the other taxing jurisdiction.
And as far as when we create a district, when the commission creates any given district, the goal certainly is to close it, be successful at the final statutory year allowed by state law. The sooner we can close it, the better. So in either scenario, well, it's both the same year, but in either scenario, we would consider this a successful outcome for our TID 5. Fortunately for us, and the Plan Commission members who've been on for a while know that about 8 years ago, after the recession hit and we had made a major investment in this district, we were not succeeding in closure prior to state mandate. And thankfully, for some good projects that we've had in the district, we've turned that around.
Okay. So that's the impact on the underlying district. And if we go back, I'd like to now go back to page 34. What we've done is we've calculated the taxes that'll be generated by different elements of the new district plan. Now we're talking about the new district again. And this first spreadsheet here on page 34 is calculating the taxes that would be generated by just the Hovde project, which was the one that started this whole thing off. Okay. And so we've got the value on the far left column here that comes in each year because it's going to be completed over 2 years. It's if you go to the bottom, you'll see the total is about $16 million in new taxable tax base. If you go back up and then follow the row across, you'll see the fact that we are estimating that there's some appreciation or inflation that's about being generated at the rate of about 0.75% per year on the new construction. That, when added to the construction value, gets us our total increment, and then we multiply that times the tax rate, and for this purpose, we're holding the tax rate flat, assuming no change in the rate. We get the numbers in the green column, and that's the taxes that get paid every year by this Hovde project. So you can see that's about $350,000 and moving up each year. The other two columns are an indication of the allocation of that as between the portion that would go to the village's other TID costs and the portion that would go to the developer for payment on that $4 million municipal revenue obligation. If you scroll all the way down, On that column, you'll see that it adds up in that tan shaded column to the 4,763,000 that is associated with their the obligation to that district. If we take a look at page 36, this is the cash flow of the district just for the Hovde project. So this is showing the revenues and the expenses. And in the far left column, that's the revenue that we got from prior page 34 coming in. We also have some capitalized interest coming on the first bond issue that comes out of the proceeds of that issue. The developer, the one great thing about this, what we call municipal revenue obligation, is that it's a note given to the developer by the village, which the village has to make payments on, but only has to make the payments if the revenues are sufficient from the project's taxes that the developer creates. So that if he has a project and the values don't hold up quite at the level that we were projecting in our plan here, that payment is reduced. And in fact, we are showing that there is a little reduction that it would occur here in the first few years as compared to him being able to get the full payment. That amount is shown as an income offset to offset the payout over on the other side. But he gets caught up on that later in the deal. But eventually, it all works. If you go to the far, if you scroll across, you'll see the payment of principal and interest on the $1,170,000. That gets paid first off the top. Then comes the municipal revenue obligation payment, and then any reimbursement coming back to the developer for any advances that he would have made in the administrative. So go to the far right then, Todd.
I do want to clarify, Mike, real quick, to remind folks, and this is a lot of numbers. I'm sorry, everyone. This 1.17, a reminder of what that's for. A couple key things. The village wants to complete the connection of Cross Street, where it currently ends by Sienna Crest, over to Madison Avenue. So that includes acquisition of the property that essentially is right there at that end by Sienna Crest. It's kind of a silver Quonset hut property. And then construction of Cross Street, which has been in the village's plan for 10 plus years. So we were seeking to do that regardless of a Hovde project. Then that also includes the obligation that Hovde is seeking of the village to front the costs for relocation of utilities that are related to the project, because Hovde's going to be building on the alley under which are utilities, therefore they need to be put in a more appropriate spot. So that's what the 1.1 is going towards.
What's the 4.7?
4.7 is the difference between, the developer's got total costs of his project. And Mike, you want to identify what your total project costs are off the top?
Our total project cost, including land acquisition, is realistically around $23 million actual cost.
And so there's a certain amount of equity they're able to raise to cover those costs. I mean, it's cash from investors that are putting money into the project. And then the bank loan that is available. And the difference that can't be, that he can't raise in either equity or loan to value from the bank is the gap that has to be funded through another source, and that's what this is. Now, one other point to be aware of in this process. One of the findings that has to be made by the village in determining whether to participate in a plan like this is what we call the but-for test. Because under the Wisconsin statute, the law says that the community shouldn't participate in a tax increment program if it can't make the finding that but for the use of tax incremental financing dollars, this project wouldn't otherwise occur as planned. And so to answer that test empirically, it's necessary to require the developer, and not just this case, but in any case, to submit to the village their own pro forma so that we can run independently an analysis of what their profitability is, given their revenues and expenses on the cash flows of the project, to determine whether those returns fall within the norms of the industry or whether they're too high or not. Because if they're, the whole idea here is to not unduly enrich the developer, but to still get the project to go ahead. And an investor is going to demand a certain return on their investment. And that ratio of return is called an internal rate of return. That number has to be in the right range. And the village is going, as it goes through the process of considering this, the first step is the project plan. This doesn't approve anything finally. What this does is it sets the parameters up within which the village can negotiate further with this developer to do a development agreement. And as part of that process, they're going to go through the diligence of looking at their pro forma and tailoring the exact amount of participation based upon those returns. So that's a lot of background, but that's an important part of what goes on in these tax increment projects. Okay, so moving to the right, I wanted to show, ultimately, we have, and scroll down to, we can see cash flows here. We've got the columns. The farthest column on the right is the outstanding principal balance that's outstanding of all the obligations. The next column to it is the cumulative fund balance in the TIF fund, and the column further to the right, left of that is the annual running balance. As you can see, it cash flows evenly as projected through 2029, but we ultimately get to a point where we have generated enough of a fund balance to be able to exceed the principal outstanding in the year 2038, which, if you scroll down, is about 11 years ahead of the maximum life allowed within the TIF district. So on a standalone basis, this district would pencil out to work very well if he delivers in terms of the value and the costs that are identified just on the Hovde piece alone. So that's that part of the deal that we wanted to show you, because that was the one that's been the most furthest along. The other parts of it we have included in cost and in cash flow. If we take a look at the numbers, again back on page 32, that we talked about earlier. These columns that are to the right of the first two columns in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 are all associated with the 175 unit project, the senior housing project, and the other miscellaneous projects that were identified by Todd earlier. And they're a combination of general obligation upfront borrowing and developer funded borrowing, similar to what the Hovde financing gap is. Because of the fact that the developers haven't finalized their plan, these are numbers that are very much subject to further modification and change. This development plan has written into it a 25% contingency swing. The numbers could go 25% higher without having to come back through this process again. If they were to exceed that, we'd have to start over and go through the same process again with all the same steps. And so the intent here is to try to identify an envelope that they could hopefully work within for these other additional costs and projects. If we take a look at page 35, this is wrapping all of the values into a spreadsheet that shows what the total taxes would be that could be generated if all of that development happened as contemplated that I talked about earlier, including the Hovde project. And if you scroll, so at the go down, you'll see there's that $49 million that I referred to earlier. And if you go over to the right, you'll see in the green column, that's the taxes that are being generated each year from the entire project from that $49 million, if all of it is delivered as projected. And then with the costs as against the revenues, and if we go to page 37,
I'm sweating here, Mike. This is my workout for the day.
you're keeping up well, thank you. Okay, on the far left is those total revenues from the project. We talked about the various other pieces of revenue coming in, of capitalized interest and borrowings and developer participation. We get total revenue, and then we have the total expenses for these various borrowings across the page. I won't go through every single column, but you get the idea. If you track over all the way to the far right, you'll see the total expenditures column right there. And you take a look at that column and you compare that to the total revenue column, and you get the difference is the annual balance number that's shown there. And that adds up cumulatively in the column just to the right of that, to the point where we track down, we'll see that, again, this district still is closing in year 2038 if everything gets delivered as per the schedule. And so I know that's a very, very quick overview of an awful lot of information, but that's basically the plan that we have to show and present. The idea here was to provide the opportunity for the Plan Commission, the public, and the village board to consider this plan and to approve it or a portion of it or modify it as you see fit. The steps in the process, by the way, after today, the Village Plan Commission has the ability, following the hearing, to consider a resolution to either approve this as it's shown, or it can modify it. But once it takes action, that action will then go to the village board. Right now, it's contemplated that the village board would act or consider it on February 5th. And the village board, if it decides to approve it, it would take its action, and then there's a final panel that consists of the representatives of the underlying taxing jurisdictions, the county, the vocational district, school district, and the village get together, and they have to vote on it as a panel. And that is the last step, and that's currently scheduled for about 2 weeks after the board act. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my formal presentation.
Okay, so I'm just going to make one comment before I open the public hearing up. Actually, I'm going to read some rules first beforehand, and then I'm going to make one comment as we go through this. So the purpose of this public hearing is for us to hear from you. We're going to have an orderly meeting process as we go through this. Confine your comments to the issue that you want to. Personal attacks, not necessary. And if you happen, I'll probably cut you off right at that moment. Efficiency of time, so we're not here till midnight tonight, but we'll stay as long as we need to. And if any of you who attended my listening session, you know I will stand and listen and talk with you until we hear everything you need to say. And then the effectiveness of our plan commission. A couple rules within that. You must register before the start of the meeting if you want to speak. So if anybody hasn't turned in their forms, if you want to speak, make sure you have those and give them to me before we start. Yep, so I can make sure we have those. So anybody else who would have those? Okay.
Thank you.
Don't want anybody to get missed. So that was one. When you get up to speak, we'll have everybody go. Keith, do we need them to go to the podium?
They could stay there.
So if you could stand and then just state your name and your address, that would be great. Your statements are limited to 5 minutes. They may not be deferred to someone else if you want to allow them time. All questions shall be directed to the chair, and the chair will decide who, if anyone, will answer the question. So that's first and foremost. I'm only one vote on the commission, but I'm going to share that I am not in support of including numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 11, and 13. Residential's right off West 2nd Street as part of this bid agreement. I have many reasons for that. One, I don't want that to become a large 4-story building, potentially on 2 blocks. I also think that sits more in a residential area, which will affect many more residential homes. I also think that it's going to be a parking nightmare, and I also think it's going to be a traffic nightmare for that zone. So there was a lot of talk in the community, and I had a great listening session with the folks there. Somehow I got quoted as being at the last Plan Commission meeting. I was not there. I was ill. I'm still battling it a little bit. You'll hear me coughing. That's why. But I'm just making that comment right off the bat. As I said, though, I'm just one vote on this commission. And, but I did want to state that before we started our open public hearing. So with that, and with no order, I'm just going to mix these up so people don't think I'm trying to stack the thing. I'm going to open the public hearing and go right on to our forms. Okay. Patrick Durden, 417 East Main Street. Undecided, representing the American Legion, and would like to speak. There you are.
So you can see it's number 49 over there, but it's been there for about 6 decades. My first question is there going to be any right of eminent domain to force any of the people to sell the properties? Can I get an answer?
During public comment, can we answer?
Well, it kind of depends on you, we can kind of put list of questions and answer them after the public hearing is over, or we can answer them as they come up. It's however you would want to.
As they come, will probably
As a
fit better
say.
with the
Will
conversation.
you answer that one?
I can, and other members of the staff will correct me if I'm wrong. The only, as Todd and Kevin have both identified, the village has been contemplating the extension on Cross Street for a number of years. And whether or not this project goes forward, I think that the village anticipates extending Cross Street. And so for that public road, there is the potential that the village would have to exercise eminent domain to acquire property for the road.
Property 33.
As far as I'm aware, that is the only circumstance in
And that's
which.
for what's considered public good right there. So-
Correct.
All right. All right, that was my first question. I'd like to get some of my seconds back here since it took so long to answer that question. The American Legion, number 49 over there, which is 417 East Street, East Main Street. We are a partner with the village in development of the village. However, I have to tell you, first off, we've not been approached. The last time we were approached by anybody was many years ago, and they were surprised it took as long for us to get together. And that really means that no matter who comes up with something, it takes the vote of every Legion member to actually come up with something. And right now, it's not for sale. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't discuss options with anybody, but I can tell you at $8,500,000 for a senior housing, it's going to cost them a little bit more than that because that land's going to cost them some money. And there's no way you're going to get it at $8,500,000 for that project. However, I understand the roads and everything else there, and I was really surprised that they weren't, if you're looking at that you're not looking at the housing in front of it either. It does kind of limit your borders in there. 47 and 48, I think, is just really just going to be part of whatever you do for parking for the library. I think it's the overflow from the library on number 46.
Nope, right there.
Right there.
Okay. There's not much use that you can do with that land unless you're doing it all at one time. So I can't imagine anything else being used there. But like I said, no one has approached us. I don't know if
Pat,
anybody
hey,
will.
Pat, by us, do you mean you were
The
the
American
village- the
Legion
village
has
has been
not
a-
been officially approached.
perhaps not by the village, but a developer has indicated to us they've had conversations with the Legion?
No,
Within,
they have not had conversations with the Legion. They've had conversations with Legion members. They have not had conversations with the Legion. They have conversations with the
that's
Legion.
perhaps, I want to make it clear that the reason staff included this as a possible project is because a developer indicated to us they've had communication with Legion members.
Legion
that's why
members,
it's- that's
but
why
they've
it's
not
included.
actually talked to the leadership of the American Legion. And I was asked by the commander to come here tonight along with Tom Parker, and we have not been to talk to, and that's the leadership. I'm a special we're both special counsel to the commander. So, no, the commander of the American Legion has not been approached. That's almost like saying I talked to a village board member, so I must have talked to the village board. No, that's not the same thing. And the same thing goes here. We have not been approached. If they're thinking about this, they need to come up with some proposals and actually approach us in writing in writing. I hadn't seen anything, I hadn't heard anything. So that doesn't work just to approach some Legion members. You're gonna always have different opinions on everything. I defer.
Quick question. So is it your opinion that you'd prefer not to have your property included?
I think it should be included, and it was included in the last TIF,
Okay.
all right?
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with including properties in a TIF, but you're also projecting that if everything of this goes through at this cost, this is what's gonna happen. And so far, no one's approached us, and I can tell you, we'd have to relocate, and the relocation would have to be a good deal. And that would mean that probably the village is gonna have to cough up some other property somewhere else that's gonna come off your tax rolls. So you gain in one and you lose in the other.
Okay, appreciate it.
Approaches, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Elaine Laufenberg. She's questioning if she wants to speak.
I just want to state that I am not for the wall property. I live on Main Street. I don't want extra traffic. I don't want a tunnel of large buildings on Main Street. I just think it takes away from the looks of the town as far as and I know some of the properties don't look so good on Main Street, but I still think it takes away the small town atmosphere that we have right now.
Thank you. Sandy Taylor possibly wants to speak.
Can you put it at the end?
Well, I had them, I mixed them up, so I suppose I can
If
move
it's
it.
covered, I'm not talking.
Unless everybody else says that. All right, next we've got Mary McNulty, 203 West Second Street.
Yeah, I'm actually affected, our family is affected by this, or my husband and I, and we are for it. I mean, I've been waiting for Waunakee for well over 30 years to do something about improving the downtown area. And I do believe that, this is a good thing. There's always going to be negativity about change, but this village cannot move forward if they don't start accepting stuff like this. I mean, over 30 years it's been for me to see anything happen on Main Street. And so I'm for it. The unfortunate thing is that I'm not going to be able to reinvest my money into housing in Waunakee. My husband and I right now, because he is handicapped, are looking at like lease properties that are affordable, such as Rolling Meadows in Oregon. The problem is that all these places have extremely long waiting lists. And so Mike and I are feeling really, really stressed because this is so up in the air. We've put aside blacktopping our driveway, putting on new gutters this year before Christmas. And then the rest of the plans to just slowly improve the house. And so that's my biggest concern, is that I would like to stay in Waunakee, but I can't afford Waunakee. I can't afford it. I've looked all over this town. There is nothing we can afford to stay and be part of the growth of Waunakee. So, there was one other issue. I don't really have any questions. Well, other than the fact that I noticed that the south side, or the north side of West 2nd Street, 2 through 13, they aren't in the TIF, and that's the only part then that really needs to be included in the TIF to be restructured. And I don't know if I've heard mixed answers on whether or not it is commercial. or residential. Right, so the zoning. And then the last thing is with 45. And this isn't part of this meeting, but I want to know why the public isn't getting a chance to vote on this, because there's a lot of crap involved in that library plan. Why we need 2 fireplaces, I'm sorry, that's a cost that is ridiculous to put in. So when does that come to a vote for the public? And my friends have asked me to ask that. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. What are you going, Kevin? You've got
Looking it up, I'll leave it for it, but I believe 2 through 13, you know, the even numbers are residential. Regardless, that particular project would require a rezone in order for it to go forward as proposed.
So looking at the time.
It's
that-
R3D residential.
residential, okay.
And being in limbo
Okay.
is difficult for us.
Okay.
There too. Good.
Next, we have Richard Saratora? Is that right? Sarabia. Sarabia. And he is, lives at 300 West Second Street,
Right.
and he's undecided. Would like to speak.
Talking about the wall proposal, we are directly across, this is our house right here, right across there, 75 feet. And the house is probably 110 years old, I think. We did some research. So we've got, and our neighbors who live right here, we've got old houses, and our foundation is stone. And frankly, I know the town's expanding, everybody knows that. It's growing like crazy. And you need stuff to come in to help the tax base, we got that. But our primary concern is, look, if you're gonna have 175 units, and most of that, if not all of the parking is gonna be underground, we're not gonna have a bunch of illegal immigrants with picks and shovels out there, it's gonna be blasting. And how's that gonna affect all the very close abutters like us? Well, like I say, we're right across the street. I don't know about if these lots, that was one of the things I was gonna say, I noticed it was outside the TIF district. If you redo it, and that's included or not included, that probably won't change.
Actually, as it was presented tonight, so everybody's clear, the blue boundaries were the original TIF district.
Right. And
The
you're-
ones that are highlighted now are the proposed TIF district. So 2 through
this may or may
13.
not be included in the new one, which,
Correct.
whatever.
Yep,
But
okay.
whether it
Just wanted to
isn't
be clear.
or is, it's not going to change the development, because that's phases 2 and 3, right, based on the program. So our consideration, especially being right next door, is, you know, what about blasting? What about damage to our foundation? What about the park, like, as you mentioned, the parking, the traffic? It's bad enough as it is. I don't know if we can do anything about it. I know that, you know, you guys need to get public input from it, and then you guys make your own decisions. So I doubt very much that a bunch of people objecting to it is going to necessarily derail any of these things. Hopefully, it'll change things, and our concerns will be addressed. And that's primary most of it. Like I say, the parking, the traffic, and especially the damage, potential damage to the foundations and stuff. Because I have friends that had lived in other areas where they had blasting for a year or two, and it was just unnerving, you know. And how are you guys? We're 100 feet away. I mean, how the hell is any of that going to be lessened? It's not. And I know Wall is a big developer, and they're very responsible. And but you know, yeah, we'll take care of any damage. I've been through one of those before, and you know, 4-year lawsuits, and good luck with that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much what I had to say.
Thank you. Next, we have Ann Lewandowski, 103.
I would like to ask my question. Sorry, I know I wrote it down, but hold on.
Is this Ann? Are you Ann?
That's me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So one of the questions that I have as kind of a younger member of the resident, I'm also on West 3rd Street. I am not keen on increased traffic and sort of the incursion into our very cozy neighborhood and the lack of charm that some of these developments have. But also, one of the things that we discovered when we were buying our house is that some of downtown Waunakee is still zoned for USDA rural loans, which means that they are more affordable and easier to access for people who are looking to stay in Waunakee or potentially move here as young people. And my question would be, what would be the outcome of these developments with their high-density housing on the potential for those loans for people looking to come into the village?
We'd have to research that issue. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Okay.
I would just say, those are pretty advantageous for first-time homebuyers, and if you are, I'm so sorry that you can't afford to stay in the whole village, and I really feel for you, but if you're looking to get into that or maintain that as, a potential market strategy, I would be concerned that that may have a detrimental impact on some of these homes.
I didn't hear that.
I just said I'm sorry that you're going through
No, I
this.
heard that, but I didn't hear the last sentence. You'd be concerned.
That potentially, creating an environment where some of these USDA rural loans are no longer available to young people, that may impact the availability of first-time home buyers to access Waunakee.
Okay, and thank you for your email, too. Lorraine Torrance, 939 Jennifer Street from Madison, representing Millhouse Quilts. Okay.
I want to address just one of those miscellaneous parts of this proposal, and that's the improvements to Millhouse Quilts. I'm a teacher there and I have been since the current ownership, the current owners have owned it, and was for the previous owner. The new owners have made a lot of improvements to that business, all of which have been wonderful and have improved Millhouse Quilts. As a teacher there, I have to go to the upstairs to teach my class on the second floor, often carrying a 35-pound sewing machine, and I can't do it anymore. Because of the age of many of the students there, the customers who come to take classes, some of them are prohibited from taking classes because there's no elevator to the second floor. So I am very much in support of an elevator at Millhouse Quilts so that I can keep working there, and many of the students can continue or begin to take classes there. I think it's a great asset to this community, and I support that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Dennis Helt, 214 K Drive.
Okay, I just have a few questions, I guess. You said that 2468 you were opposed to. What about 1357? I'll let you answer that after I ask this other one. The gentleman who spoke here, here's how I understand it. We paid 1.1 million so that Hubdy can hook up to these utilities and have it set right. And then we pay them 4.7 million over time so that they build here. Is that what it is? Or is it, I don't get the 4.7 million. So that we can have a better tax base later, we basically give them back 4.7 million of their tax money to build. Okay, and also, there was one other thing, which I have forgotten, but that's enough. Well, I was gonna say, I'm kind of against these, if that's the case, if we gotta pay businesses to build here. For the most part, I like that but-if thing. If we could probably do some of these things better and not have so many TIF districts, that's my opinion. People would wanna come in here and build without that.
Okay, so
The 1357.
1357, that block, I consider that a corridor of the Main Street. You see it right there. The houses on the back side are part of the residential more. I see commercial being on the front side.
So would we build like a 4-story apartment or something?
I don't think you could build a 4-story apartment on the half side. It just wouldn't be possible. But I do see some other businesses that may have interest in doing that. Or potentially, you could even have some senior housing condominium type things, 2-story flats, something along those lines. I think that would be a great opportunity for us there. Now, I'll just make a quick comment because I know that everybody maybe not everybody, but a lot of people like the Packer House. I don't view the Packer House as a historical building in our community, and I say that with sincerity. There's people that really fight hard for that, and I appreciate that. But that was done by the owner of the home 7 years ago, and that just to me doesn't make it historical. So I'm just to be clear, that's number one on the thing, I believe, is where that says. So that's my reasoning, Denny, is I think we could have something that would fit very nicely there from a
Okay.
commercial
I just
standpoint.
wanted to see what you thought of, I thought they might be different opinions from you, but, and also, could I get an answer from the gentleman who spoke on all that? Is that about what was I right, or am I wrong, or what?
Well, you're right. You're right. The whole idea, though, is that, and this is not just unique to Waunakee. This is a phenomenon that's across the United States. And we're talking about creating a program. The state legislature created this program to attract new development, where development wouldn't otherwise happen. And that but-for test that I was talking about is so important in the process of evaluating. I mean, nobody's interested in trying to create a program that unnecessarily lines an individual's pocket if they could have done it without the participation. You may have a philosophical perspective on whether or not there should be any involvement, period, and that's fine. I mean, that's just a decision that, from a policy standpoint, the community comes to grips with and decides. But this is a program that is available to help create development where it can happen, and at the end of the day, the benefit to the community is you get the tax base in perpetuity as long as the building is there. That tax base, when this district closes, is tax base that goes back into the pool, that reduces the property taxes for the county, the school district, vocational district, and everybody else when the program is over. So that's, you have to view it from a long-term perspective and take into account that this is $49 million, in this case, of additional tax base that wouldn't have otherwise likely occurred, and certainly at that level. I don't know if that answered, but
Yes,
that's the
thank
answer.
you, yes. I think I'm still under 5, I'll just be quick. Yeah, I feel we're not really blighted for the most part in Waunakee. Maybe there's one or two exceptions, I don't know, but for the most part, I think let businesses come in if they want to and then deal with them without paying them to be in the TIF district. There.
Can I say something at the end, just to address the historic part of it?
If we have time in a second, absolutely, if we have time, absolutely. But I will comment also to Denny's comments quick, in regards to not incenting, we don't need to incentivize the people to come in. Mrs. McNulty, is that right? Stated earlier that she, for 30 years, there was nothing done on Main Street. We have investors now and developers that want to come in to Waunakee to develop. What our goal is to shape what the community is going to look like, and we don't want to lose our village status, is what I look at it as, that it's a community that is not a big city. That's not what we want to turn, that's not what I want to see happen.
How much can we shape it without being a TIF district? Or how much? Say they pay it all yourself, but can we still shape it as a village?
So, how much I want to talk about it, but,
Well, I was just gonna say, you can, I meant Freer, you can shape your community, what you need money to shape it. Without the money, you can talk shaping all you want, but it isn't gonna happen because you don't have the cash. So you're in charge of the aesthetic and how it develops, whether it's 4 stories or 2 stories. You can't dictate that or encourage that dialogue if you don't have the money. It's that simple.
I mean, maybe we don't need industry though. Okay, I'm sorry, I spoke too much,
Okay.
I'm done.
that was to your comment, so that this is one of the things, and Mr. Slavish is here tonight, and if you want to abuse him, I'm okay with that. But I'm kidding. No, we want to thank Mike for coming here tonight, and so he can hear what your comments are as well. That shows something right now, that developer's here to hear what you have to say. Sandy, you just came up again. Do you want us to go at the end? Okay.
Hi, I'm Sandy Taylor. I have a parcel that's white on the north side of Main Street that I've worked on at the furniture store without any TIF money to do a $140,000 improvement on our building 3 years ago with my own money and my business partner's money. If money was available, we sure would like an elevator too, because we not do 35-pound things, we lift 500-pound things. We didn't have that opportunity in the past when we did it, so if you are going to do the TIF district, I would like it to come around the side where Susan Gardner's building and ours is, so that the south side of the railroad could be included for an expansion for our warehouse, maybe more show space and an elevator possibility. But I also would like to tell you about when we reshaped the front of our building, it was meant to be historic and be part of the community here. We've been asked to go out to H&R. We've been asked to go out south on Century Avenue by many people, where the fitness place is now and things, because it would have been easier. My business partner and my husband wanted to go one level, no issues, not the up and down. Our building is not an old building. Our building is a historic building. It was the first commercial building in Waunakee. So we have all kinds of issues with electricity, stairs, movement. Luckily, we're ADA passed so that we don't have an elevator or anything to make help our customers go up. So I'm kind of mean a chocolate mint chip, which means I'm not vanilla and I'm not chocolate. I would like some growth in Waunakee, but not at the expense of the historic homes that are on the south side. I think the Hovde building's great, that's there now. I think it's brought a great life. The Madison and Main apartment buildings has been wonderful for our community too. I have to say, as I drive by, and I have to drive by where the library site is every day to and from work, and I like it better than what it was, so amen to that. So I'm just gonna say, if you are going to do that, I would like extension to the back portion of that added to it if that is a possibility. And I would say tread lightly, because not everybody wants major growth. And I know Chris is from here, and a lot of people on this board are from here. They're community people, and I think since I've been here 21 years, they have really put the community's best interest on most projects. I'm not gonna say it gets an A+, but I feel for people that can't live here. It is an expensive community. I love that you told me that about the extra financing and things. So I'm just kind of saying, I don't mean to be chocolate mint chip, but I said, if you're going to do it, I would like to be included in the back, and I'm sure Susan Gardner would be too, because as you see, that's the majority of what's left on the north side, which we both have spent a lot of our own money without any community money put into it. As well as I don't want to see the beautiful homes that I've seen people redo on the 2 blocks south of Main Street. I think that's beautiful and it's amazing, and it helps with all the subdivision feel of our community. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Oh wait, I do have one more thing. Before we do build, I would like to see a little bit more fill-in, because I do know some of the ladies that have beautiful businesses on Main Street right now, that if the T-wall portion goes through, 2 out of 2 people I've spoke with that have businesses will not afford to be able to pay the rent of what possibilities are available left to them here now. And they have 2 female businesses that have expanded greatly. And if they don't have those 2 locations, they don't know if they will be able to exist.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm done.
Okay. Good job. Can we come back to that with whether or not TID 5 would be able to support what she's asking for? Or would you recommend including that?
Can I understand better exactly where, which parts?
121 West Main, that weird long angled one. But that's really was not my main
Understood. I just.
focus until I heard the elevator issue tonight.
Ask that question since.
I think my gut reaction right now is it's better if it were included in this one rather than.
If we include it in?
There's a way to do that. If we can make connectivity, it's gotta have.
Well, across the road right here, Mike,
Okay.
public right away.
Yeah, because I think there are enough obligations in the underlying district already.
Okay.
Are you talking about the furniture store, or are you talking about the old,
Yes. She's talking about the furniture store.
Well, that was the least of my talking. I was mainly talking about tread lightly with how much building we have going on in the community and respect people's residential homes. And that there is a lot of people who've put their own money forth on their business, not anywhere near the millions of dollars that are on other funds that are, I said, a wonderful welcome to our community. So I just said, there's got to be a middle ground somewhere.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Again. Okay. All right, Carrie Zajicek? Am I close?
Yep, you are, thanks.
Thank you. You support? Would you like to speak?
Sure.
Go ahead. 100 Baker Street, Millhouse Quilts?
Correct. So, I'm one of the new owners of Millhouse Quilts, and we appreciate being part of the community. And being one of the owners, obviously, I'm in support of the proposal, and including our property and other properties as well, as part of the additional, and not the main focus, as a Hubby property. And I do agree with some of the comments in the sense that keeping a small-town community, I think, is important, as well as accommodating future growth and future development. I think Main Street is what I envision on Main Street as being an area where you could park and have your cup of coffee, go to the boutique shops, which I consider Millhouse Quilt being part of that, and enjoying that area. And there's been a lot of activity in regards to the Christmas parade and other things that are highlighting the Main Street, and I really am in favor of that. Obviously, the store, Millhouse Quilts, has been there since 1875, and Mike, being the current owner, took a big risk 20 years ago in taking that property and turning it into what it is today. And our vision is to continue that, and it's not only just the elevator, but in the short period of time that we've owned the property, 2.5 years, we've seen some significant growth, and we want to continue that. And right now, we're constrained with what we can do with the property. We've got a basement that is primed for commercial use, and as was mentioned earlier, we've got a 2-story building. Outside of the high school, we have the most classes that are offered in the area by far. We offer at least 40 classes every 4 months, and anywhere from 6 to 10 people will attend those classes in addition to clubs. Significant activity through the building. And we have a second floor that could be used for public use as well. A real large classroom, as well as a small classroom that is available, and I've talked to Todd about that on numerous occasions. So again, we're in favor of it, and I don't know if there's other folks that want to use my time. I don't know if you want to speak or not.
If I may, I'm Kim Zychek, Carrie's husband, co-owner of Millhouse Quilts. Millhouse has been an important part of this community for 22 years, I believe it is. We employ 8 to 10 people, depending on where we are. We contribute to area businesses by referring customers that come from Minnesota to Illinois every day, pretty much. We have customers from around the world, New Zealand, Australia. We're in, that's just a few of them that were in the shop this summer. So, we have a pretty dramatic effect on surrounding businesses. We're always asked for other businesses for people to visit, for meals, and the more we can grow and stay strong, I think the more we help support the community and keep Waunakee strong.
Yep, and I would just add that, just to piggyback on that, we do get customers. We are a draw. We're a regional, and I mean large regional store, in that there's people that will identify us as a destination, whether it's from Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, and during the summer we get customers from all over the state, all over the country. All over the world. We've got every country represented, as well as, every state represented, as well as at least a dozen foreign countries that will know of our stores. So, again, thanks for your support, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, next we've got Edith Laufenberg, 234 Fairview Circle. She's representing herself.
I sure am.
Oh, there you go, okay.
I guess I'm back to the T-wall project. When I went to the meeting, the public meeting that you had last week, you specifically said you were not in favor of that. Now, tonight I hear you don't want 2 through 12, but you don't care about 1 through 13, or I gotta take my glasses off to see all the way. I can't read the other numbers. Did you change your tune?
No, not even a little. I said right off the bat, I didn't support the T-wall project the way the way they presented it. What I said, and Denny asked the
Then
question.
someone asked you, what do you mean?
Correct. So then Denny asked a little bit ago, why didn't I say 1357? And 2468, 11, 13, I want to keep that residential, which I also stated at the meeting. The ones on the front could be used as commercial, for commercial businesses to be out there. I don't.
We've got so many empty commercial now.
And all that means is it could be. We have 27 years that in the future, that might be something that we need there.
When, they're not gonna start building for 27 years?
They may not start for 15, 16, 17, 20 years in that.
Or
Just
they
because
might
we're
start
forming
next
it.
year.
And that's just like Mr. Durden said with the Legion site. Just because we're forming it, doesn't mean something's gonna happen there. It's just giving the ability for it to happen.
Well, but, you know, everybody on that block, on both sides, have been approached by T-Wall and have agreed to sell. So it could be next year already, couldn't it?
That's not true. No, because we'd have to change the zoning in order to do that. That's
Oh,
what we.
really?
So we'd have to change zoning in order for them to put up the project that they had.
'Cause I,
approvals
right
and
now, to get out on Main Street from West Street, if you want to go towards downtown, you turn right. You go up to Greiber Heating Corner and turn left. You have to go around the block, so when you get back to Main Street, you make a right-hand turn and you're going with the traffic. And I know the same holds true for down next to the bicycle shop. I can't think of what that street is. Fish. But it's the same issue. Traffic is bad. And also, I'm concerned about the noise. I agree, downtown, that's fine. I guess I don't consider where that section is to be part of downtown. I mean, unless you want all of Main Street to look like that, because that's what's gonna happen. That's it.
Yeah, so the front side, as I said, there's current businesses there now. And if they wanted to make a change, sell their business to someone else who wanted to rechange it, make it a different shape, whatever you wanted to do, the TIF district's just giving them opportunities. Just like Sandy is asking for, if she wanted to expand on that property, so on and so forth, they could have that ability to do it.
Well, I understand that.
But it would be just the block on Main Street. And really, it's not a large enough zone that, to put an apartment complex with just having one side of the street. That's why they were looking at both sides, the houses behind and the commercial on the front, in order to be able to accomplish it, and it
Okay,
still
so I
doesn't
didn't
accomplish
think
it.
that there was commercial in the front of that one. At the other day, you said there wasn't
And
any.
they don't really have any commercial proposed.
Right.
Saying
All
is if somebody wanted to put commercial there,
Okay.
where the commercial is already, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
If you're talking like the bicycle shop,
Yes.
well, I guess I assumed, since that's number 12, it would be tore down.
And
Or
if
13.
Oh, no, it's
12.
You're right.
you have 12, 10, 9, all those right there. That would be
Okay, and that's
commercial.
the bicycle shop, right?
Yep. Then you've got the Kearneys that are right in that zone too. You know, they may want to do something with their building too. You know, enhance it, make it a little more valuable, where they could come in and request TIF
Okay,
assistance.
but they're not big apartment buildings.
And I don't see a big apartment building going there, is what I'm getting at.
You think if you cut off 2 through 13, 1 through 12 isn't going to be 4 stories?
No.
I got 1 and 1 no.
You're correct, it will not be 4 stories.
Okay, I didn't know if it was just bobblehead or what. Thank you.
You are the first person to call Brian a bobblehead.
I did not call him.
Remember, we have to go back to we can't call names on here. Thank you. Thank you.
Call him one.
Oh, I'm joking. It's okay. All right, Cheryl Schenk, 5326 Arapahoe Lane, here for Millhouse Quilts.
Yes, that's me. I also teach classes at Millhouse Quilts. I teach mostly beginners. I teach a few different area shops, and I will say that Millhouse is really an anchor kind of quilt shop. It's known regionally. If I tell people that I teach in the Madison area, they always ask if it's there. And I do have students that come in from Stoughton and Brooklyn and Reedsburg, all over the place to come to Waunakee to take these classes. So I know that there are potential students that would like to take classes but can't because of the stairs. So I would just like to add my support to the being able to put an elevator in there.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Mary Ellen Kearney, 317 West Main Street.
I think in considering things, you have to consider the aesthetics of the village. And also, I said this at the other meeting, you keep referring to properties as being historic, and yet there's never been anything done to designate anything as historic. But I do know that West Street was where the village ended, that when it was originally platted in 1871. So that is a historic area. Maybe some of the houses aren't historic, but that's the core of what Waunakee was in the beginning. And I'm afraid that something like the 4-story apartment building just does not fit with residential areas. It's going to be a ripple effect. All the houses around it are going to find it not pleasant. Those are going to be going or gone. And those are the areas where there is the most affordable housing for people coming to Waunakee. They love the charm of some of these older houses and being able to fix them up and modernize them. And so if you plant something like the wall project in there, that's the kiss of death.
Well said, Mary Ellen. Thank you. I hope I never feel the kiss of death, but I'm sure it'll come at some point.
We'll miss you.
We'll miss you. Carrie Arneson, 923 Lexington, own 217 West Main Street.
So I've owned 217 West Main Street for 12 years next week. And prior to that, I owned a home on West 3rd Street. And I'm just not against the tax district as a whole, but would like the modifications that you support, Chris, in terms of modifying it so that we can't have a very large, huge apartment complex. And when I bought the house, I was a single on Main Street. I was single, and it was nearly impossible for me to afford a home here. And everyone has already mentioned, others have mentioned that the affordable homes are in that block. Whether you want to rent them here, not every family's dreaming of an apartment life, or you want to buy one. That's where they are if you're looking for entry level. And so I would ask that you not do something that would put us at risk of losing those.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, our former village president, Ann Helt. You're up.
You probably don't all know me, but I used to be the village president here way back when. And I can tell you at the time that we were there, they came in, I don't know, but it wasn't you. But they came in, they offered they offered us that new plan here. And we turned it down. And what do you suppose? All that side of Waunakee was built over there. A lot of it was built over there without that. And I have the feeling too that we're placing too much on this, way too much on this. And it's taking a lot of time from all you board members. I don't know if that's all included in your plan or not. The meetings, the time you spent writing out papers, filling out forms. Is this all included in here? Who pays for that? Is it us taxpayer? I don't know. Todd, maybe you could tell me.
Who pays my salary?
No, I know who pays your salary. No, you're evading the question, Todd. You're good at that.
What specifically what?
But I think.
How are administrative costs paid?
Yes.
With the TIF? Well, I'll be really clear with you. The village hires Ehlers and Associates to coordinate the administrative function of TIF district creation.
All right, that cost you ready.
Each district, Mike, there's essentially a set fee, a set base fee. Is it 17,000? What was, can you help me? What's that?
Wrong, 14.
14. So, and that all the paperwork coordination is handled by them, and that cost, I believe, Mike, you build in to be reimbursed from the district itself. Is that correct? It's in the project plan. So the district itself funds that project cost. So I think that answers your question, Ann.
I think you're spending too much time on this TIF. I think you better start thinking about low-cost housing to bring it down a little bit more level with the higher income houses that are here, because it sure is hurting a lot of people. I guess I told you that last week too. A lot of these people are living on Social Security, only Social Security papers are owned, and they did not get very much because they do not have a pension, and they also been on a farm somewhere, sold that little farm, came to town, no, and pretty soon it was all gone, and he died or she died. So go back to our old pension or our old Social Security number, and it's pretty darn poor. Yeah, we got 3% last year. I'm one of them. I'm 65 now. Believe that one. But anyway, it come to the point where these people, a lot of them are living. I know a lot of them. I've lived here a long time, and I know a lot of them. And they're trying to find a place to live, selling what they do have left. Maybe they got a big mortgage on it yet, on that house. And this is something you guys got to look at. Please, please look at it, because I can see some of these women and some of these men are trying to find a lower place to live. And all I can say is please load on it. And also that thing on over here by the, I'm concerned about all these sewers that are in this town. I'm an old sewer lady. Anyway, as I was there for almost 10 years till we had something happen in the family. Anyway, I retired then, but I sure love to be there now. But anyway, all those sewers in this town, and especially that one block back here that you're talking about up west here, there's some dang old sewers in there. Who's going to replace all them, and who's going to pay for them? Is it going to be the taxpayers? There's a lot of questions involved here. I hope you look ahead, guys, because I could tell you a lot. If you want to talk to me sometime, I will. And thank you very much for listening, and I'll let it go at that.
Thanks, Ann.
I'll be less than 5 minutes.
Oh, that's okay. And-
Less than
oh,
5.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, number one,
Yeah.
about the sewers, 203 West 2nd Street, that's where I live. It's kind of gotten run down in the last few years since my husband had a brain tumor and can't do a lot of the upkeep on the house. I get that. But we have had new plumbing put in underneath from the house, from the old water cistern all the way out to the street. We are still having problems with backing up from the main sewer system on the street, up to our house, where we have to flush that out. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is, when T-Wall originally approached us, this was going to be a 3-story project, and he had said that there was going to be retail space in the front on Main Street. Since then, when we got a letter from them just back a few months ago, it all of a sudden turned into a 4-story, all apartments, okay? So I think I like what he originally presented to us. I also love the ambiance of this town. I love the quilt shop. I don't ever want to see that go. I love the old mill property. I don't want to see that go because I think it's historic. But I do want to see a little bit more retail come in to support, to bring more money into the town, and also to make it so that these people that are filling these apartments actually have places to walk to. Because right now, there are no restaurants or anything like that. I mean, let's put it this way, very, very few. And then the other thing is, my house is well over 120 years old. But my house is not a quality house. It is not the same quality of those on the 100th block north side of West 2nd Street, or the 300 block of, on the north side of Main Street. You know, I would like to keep those, but I would also like to see the development happen and make sure that the architecture is that addresses that hominess that you had said too, like what Summit did by including the old bank in there. I think the architecture of the one kitty corner from Quick Trip, I think it sucks, excuse my language, but it does. It doesn't have anything to do with charm. It was way too modern. And that's like, if T-Wall does tear down my area and build, I want to make sure that he keeps the integrity of this town. Okay? And I think that's all I wanted to say. I wanted you to know what we were told and then about my house, that it's not quality. And the historic part of it, we couldn't get a loan to historically bring it back because it isn't a quality house like the one, the old O'Malley house, you know? So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm gonna close the public hearing part of this. And we get to discuss our boundaries and
I would just mention, you're welcome to stay. The commissioners are going to have discussion about the proposal now as well. So you can hear more discussion if you care to stay.
Well done.
All right, we'll just give it a minute here. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for sharing.
About this district.
You can see your little boys.
Said that someone did. Someone
It's okay. I mean, it's all right. That's why I
it's
asked the
almost like
question.
there's a minefield out there. We don't know where you're going to step.
I can stay for a while.
Got it. Thank you.
Bye, Tom. Okay.
I think we lost control. All right, 1 minute for everybody to get out if you're leaving.
You can chat.
Nice to see you.
Right
Take care. Well done, honey.
We'll give everybody 1 minute. Did we talk your topic yet? Did we get your topic yet?
Hey. Hey, mister. Oh. I usually do, Tom.
You want a room for the night?
I think you taught me
Want me to
social
get your
studies.
room for the night?
I think that's one of the things. I know. This was my 5th grade teacher right here. She taught me everything I know. That's right.
want to say it publicly, so I can email it to you as well. I am very concerned. A lot of these things say this, so I can see both sides of it.
That's tonight. It started at 7 o'clock.
Oh, then I missed all the bulls.
I wanted to tell you, there's nowhere for me to shop in this town.
Alabama, Georgia.
We're working on that. That's the part we're working
But I
on.
also don't want to see
Yeah,
these
apparently.
monstrosity
Let's see.
buildings.
Brad
You've
went to
got
get something to drink.
And a wall here, the street, and a wall there. This is the street. This is East
No,
Washington.
my son had a basketball game. That's what I called
No, not up close. I can appreciate everything you said there.
My buddy was all excited. He's playing a couple songs. Keyboard player with yours.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, so who left here? Should I wait for Kevin or no? I guess I'll wait for Kevin and Gary.
You know, on Main Street there. Then,
Or Chevy.
The largest portion.
yes.
Good job.
See, Gary.
You don't have bedrooms downstairs, you don't have restaurants.
Mr. Hunt did a great job, but it is true.
Well, they,
Such a complex.
They're coming right now.
You don't get to hear that often.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. That mom's got to keep you in line.
Yeah, she does.
Oh, he keeps me in line.
No, you keep him in line.
Okay, so we're back, Keith. I don't know if you've been recording this whole time, but we're good. One other thing I'll say is that I hear a lot of you guys, please, if you're from the female side of things, apply to be on these commissions and boards and committees and things. Because it's important that you do, and you apply through the village website, and go on there and put your interest in, and we'd love to have more diversity on our boards, and unfortunately, a lot of times it ends up as, not that I don't like you guys, to be clear.
That's what he's saying. He just said he needs more ladies up there.
Right on the committee.
Going for your job, Chris.
Like I have enough, maybe in 3 years. Let me
Okay.
get my next one through school.
All right, so our discussion is really going to revolve around our options for what we want to do at this point. One, we could just say that we're going to do the Hovde project, and the Hovde project is going to be the only part of this TIF. I'm personally not in favor of that, because I would like to see some flexibility to this TIF over this time frame. I would redraw where we do have this TIF and not include numbers 2 through 13. And to Sandy's question about bringing in the opposite side, I guess my question would be to Mike here, how do we say what's going to be included, what's not going to be included on that side of the street? Or should we just include all the commercial side?
You know, it really ought to be a conscious planning assessment of what the potential is for, you know, the parcels that you're looking at over there. And I'd encourage you to think a little more broadly, just a single parcel, but as you point out, it's across the street, so it's contiguous by virtue of the street that you've added trees.
Will that have
Single.
any impact on TIF 5?
No, it'd be marginally the same. I mean, it'd have a very, very, very small impact, because it would be taking adding this to the base value of the new district, and then any appreciation of value that would occur on that parcel, or any improvement that would occur on that parcel going into the future, would no longer be part of the underlying district. But it isn't going to move the needle significantly on the underlying district.
To expand the boundary, does that have an impact on the timing and our process right now? In other words, we have to republish republish and hold another hearing with a
Well, I
new.
defer to your village attorney to a point, but in my view, I think, you know, this is in response to the hearing that was held already. And so I think it's not, in my view, it wouldn't be necessary to have that, unless, as a matter of public policy, you'd like to have, you know, adult suspended.
Okay. Gary?
Hey, Chris, I'd support, the discussion you had that, you know, taking 2, 4, 6, 8, 11, and 13 out of the district, looking at a way to include Sandy and, you know, areas that may find benefit in the TIF, if we can add those to the district. That's what I would support at this time. But I think it's right to leave the Legion in there. It makes sense. It gives them the opportunity, if it ever comes to them, they're in a position to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I'd agree with Gary, and I think that, just to address, I think somebody said it doesn't mean a lot if people come and complain. It means a lot when people come and complain. It really does, and I'd agree. And I'm sure that's what Chris heard in the listening session last week. You don't want a 4-story building by you on 2nd Street, and I can see why. Doesn't seem appropriate to me either. Doesn't seem appropriate, I think, to Gary and Chris of what you've heard of so far. In terms of the value of the TIF to the village, it's something that it's awfully easy, and I understand what Denny's saying. It's awful easy to say, well, we're just not going to give developers money, and they'll just have to pay for it themselves. That's where the but-for test comes in. That's I've got faith in our village staff and everybody involved to do what's best for the village. And yes, the developer's gonna get some money. And it's hard for somebody to say, hey, there's $4 million going. But when you realize it might be $23 million that Hubsy's putting forward to get a $16 million worth of taxable property, you can understand where this gap comes in. And it's why I would certainly be in favor of the TIF 8 overlay, not including the land along Second Street, and looking at the expansion to the north side of Main Street if it's deemed appropriate.
Brian?
I think I could say it any better than that. The 4-story is pretty appealing to me. The first time we saw it, still is today. So I wouldn't have a problem taking that out of the district at all. And to the support of the desires of the community, there's no reason not to expand it north side of Main Street.
Brad?
I look at the tax overview, the TIF district overlay, and see it as a real benefit. I've not seen a community come out and talk about the disappointment of the TIF district. There has been some situations out there in the state that they have failed, but overall, they've always been successful. Perfect example of that is the community of Middleton. They've had great success with it, putting an overlay on their TIF district. Does it create a lot of alarm and frustration with village members, community members? Yes, because it's a very complicated model. I'm a developer. I develop LIHTC projects, low-income housing tax credit projects, Section 8, Section 42. So I understand the value of TIF and how you need those TIF dollars to make a project work. I hear it constantly in the community. We don't need another pizza restaurant. We need restaurants. We need businesses. We need shops. You're not going to get businesses and shops if you don't have lights on, you don't have some additional traffic in your community. Is it unfortunate? Is it frustrating for those who live around that area? Absolutely. But we're not going to get the businesses that we want. We're not going to get the big draws that we say we need as a village if we don't do projects that are being proposed. I look at it as we're very fortunate to have some of the strongest developers looking at us here in Waunakee and the opportunities it can bring to bring the Main Street through. Will it be disappointment? Absolutely. Look at the roundabout right behind us. Was that a big argument? Was that a big frustration point? It was a huge sticking point. How do people feel about it now? Where are their conversations?
Hate it.
Hate it.
I know, I still.
Okay, let him finish.
I personally look at it, being a pro developer and seeing the growth, adding lots 2 through 13, and then adding the additional blocks on Second Street behind it. Those buildings are tired. They're worn, they're weathered. The people on the other side, they're gonna see their values increase. It's gonna be frustrating, it's gonna be aggravating for that time period, but once you see that energy and you see that vibrance coming into the community, it will have value. Unfortunately, with that, brings in higher housing cost. Being a developer of Section 8 and Section 42 housing, I'm very passionate about affordable housing. But who is gonna come into a community like this when the land is so expensive and the opportunities are so limited? And I see this overlay as a big plus for the village. I can see ourselves even adding additional acreage to the TIF district to see the growth happen.
So, did I hear you right, that you are in favor of keeping 2 through 13 in? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard. Okay. Okay, so, at this point, do we want to make a motion?
Hey,
If we were-
Chris, one option I talked to Brian before we left and at a staff level is that we thought if there's gonna be changes to the plan, that we should schedule a special plan commission meeting. And I know you closed the public hearing. You certainly could continue that public hearing again when we have the special meeting. The date that we were looking at was Monday, January 29th. And we would make changes to the plan based on the feedback that we got from the majority of you, and then bring it back to the plan commission for consideration.
Okay. So is that my decision, or do I put that out to the committee?
I'd defer to you.
Motion.
Yeah, a motion would be helpful, I think.
Motion.
I'd move to hold a special planning commission meeting on January 29th to review,
What are you proposing that we're gonna be reviewing?
review the modifications to TIF 8. Or
Define your modifications so we can make sure we're clear on that.
the addition of north side of Main Street and the elimination of 2 through 13.
Okay, so the motion's been made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Can I ask a clarification,
Yeah.
Chris? So I'm gathering that the interest in adding additional parcels is to provide opportunity for grant, loan, or facade-type assistance depending on the project. If that's the case, is there any business property, north side of Main Street, from Water Street all the way down to Fish Street that you wouldn't want included? I know Sandy's talking about perhaps a greater level of investment, which would lead to a development agreement based on the valuation increase you might generate on property, but
Or already has.
we talked about that 3 years ago.
Good
If you, no, let me just take a second.
Keeping it
Before,
light.
before Sandy started her project, we had a conversation about potential incentives, and what was clear in that conversation is the challenge of the existing district in that it had very little life yet, life left. So we did the calculations. We thought, okay, 100,000, maybe it'll generate X in value. A facade generally doesn't increase the value a whole lot. A window is a window, whether it's young or old. And we ran some numbers on valuation increase. We talked to the assessor with 10 years left, and we looked at what it might be possible. And I think you made the
We were just gonna suck it up.
you made a choice to proceed without complexity of a development agreement, which goes to point at the deficiency of the current district. I guess that's why I want to point that out. But are we picking and choosing additions, or are we talking all of those business properties along?
My concern that, as I look at this, there was some discussion about properties on the north side, residential properties on the north side of Main Street that they really felt needed to stay residential. My concern is taking properties like that, including them in the TIF, and make them maybe more attractive for a developer than to say, hey, I'm gonna buy your house, I'm gonna tear it down, I'm gonna put a business in here. I'm more concerned about existing business properties on the,
Basically
that
from
side.
Fish over on the north.
Well, yeah, from Moffett. Moffitt's the furthest.
Moppet,
Moffett is the furthest
yes.
west.
that's just my comments, because there's been some concern about that residential on the north side and to keep that continuity.
Is the bank right there?
So it's just,
So, do you want to amend your motion?
yeah, should we say, is that Fish Street? Is that how we wanna
Hey,
term that?
I wonder whether we want to try to put some staff attention to what properties, because I also go down on South Street, and you've got the law firm there and the Hello Gorgeous Salon.
I think if you gave us the opportunity to work at a staff level, based on the comments we heard back, it gives some reasonable directness. You can always make changes when we bring it back to you on the 29th, but let us give you our best reasonable understanding of what you're trying to accomplish.
All right, that's fair. Is that fair?
Don't put yourself in a box
Pat?
tonight.
You had the motion. Okay. And so we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
So we'll see everybody again in a few short weeks.
What was, what?
Is that at 6?
And there'll be a test on
6
TIF
o'clock.
that big night.
6 o'clock on the 29th.
Or get hot flash.
Okay. Next is our next public hearing. Everybody's leaving now. Mike, did you want to talk to everybody or not really? I could have given you an opportunity if you wanted to speak.
Or was I?
They've mostly cleared, but I think
Are you guys one?
if they have any questions for you on the auditorium or anything, you can. Thank you.
Saying that she didn't agree. Well, it's just funny because now.
Oh, I think removal of these properties on Second Street definitely changes the T-wall plan. Oh, I'm sure we'll have, I'm sure
he'll be talking to us.
Because I love young women entrepreneurs trying to.
Yeah, I suspect that,
One of them is completely.
yes,
opposite.
we'll have to circle back with him.
Property sales.
And,
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go, Chris.
I'm just waiting for Todd to get back in here.
All right.
Okay. Next public hearing item was regarding the proposed project plan boundaries and creation of tax increment district number 9.
Number 9.
So Mike, I'll have you introduce again, and then we'll open our public hearing.
Okay, well, again, this plan is an overlay proposal. This time, what we're talking about is overlay existing tax increment district number 3. And for those that are familiar, it's the Waunakee Business Park. But, there's a map on page 9.
oh, it went too far.
There it is. So the existing TID number 3 is the blue line on the map. What's proposed here is the creation of a new overlay for just a single parcel within that district, the shaded parcel that's indicated. And this is a project that has been brought forward by the Tormac Company, and is envisioning an improvement as depicted in the plan in renderings pages 17 through 20, 19. Now, as I understand it, and Todd, you may want to comment on this right away. We have some numbers in here that evidently, I'm informed today, are probably a little low in relationship to the value that's contemplated here, because apparently there's been some dialogue between the village and Tormac about improving the nature of the structure.
Right. Yeah, and there's a better picture than all these. I think these seem to be just the tiny home component of the proposal. The front door looks much better than this. The project plan, I believe, included an incentive amount in the neighborhood of $420,000, which related to Tormac's first proposal scope. Now, that scope was largely a metal building and was of a level of design quality the village wouldn't support. And in that, Tormac suggested, well, an enhanced material is going to increase the cost per square foot by X, and sought additional support to enhance the quality of the building, at which the village board indicated to them that we'd be willing to consider, based on the outcome of an enhanced building, something between $400,000 and about approximately $600,000, which is somewhat dependent on what the final value outcome is of their project. So what I would ask for Plan Commission consideration on is an adjustment or inclusion of a range. Maybe, Mike, all you need is a max.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you, Todd, if you could flip to pages 25, start at 25 there. I just want to point out that the value that was contemplated, we understand this showed a building value of $4,485,000 after we take the base off. It's a net increase of about $3.5 million. We understand that this number will increase because of the improvements to the structure based upon this additional incentive that's being considered. So that will generate the sufficient level of additional cash. Now, if you take a look at the next page, page 26, this was what we were expecting that $3.5 million was going to generate, about $75,000 plus a year in taxes. With the enhancement, you would expect that number to increase to a level sufficient to cover the additional costs. Page 27 was showing the cash flow of this overlay district, and it basically identified that the 420,000, even with the lower value, could have closed, I think Pam was right, by year 2026. And so that's a good thing. The reason, again, that it wasn't included in the existing underlying district is that district isn't got the cash flow, and it closes in 2024. So if we get more value, you know, I don't know. It would probably be a wash in terms of the outcome. And conceivably could even close a year sooner. So it's a single purpose deal. It involves a single development. The developers agreed apparently to the increase in the investment in the project, which will require some additional support from the village. But so you have a resolution that would be before you if you choose to act on it. This would be after the public hearing, of course. But that resolution would be adopted with the understanding that we'd be looking to increase the participation of up to about 600,000, is it?
Yeah, I would, would you suggest sort of more flexibility? Well, we've got the 25% component built. So with that said, I think 600,000 is a good number for documentation.
So I think you got the picture on the rest of it. I don't have, this is a fairly straightforward plan. So answer questions as you need.
And Mike, this is a pay-go also?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll open up our public hearing. This is our attorney, no try to do this all right.
Or is it under?
Open up the public hearing. No appreciation, so. Anybody have any comments? No? Okay.
Chris, I could add some, or do you want to close it before I?
I'll close it before you do.
Okay.
I wanted to give everybody the opportunity that's still here. Okay, then I'll close the public hearing. Todd, go ahead.
As you heard Mike and I talk about at our last TIF, it seems typical whenever you generate or create a TIF district to look around the boundaries to see whether there's reason to consider additional adjacent property to be included. The same, that exercise occurred at a staff level, and there's only one logical potential addition here, and that was to include this yet undeveloped component of our park. Frank H. Street now has been extended here, and you know this is kind of unplanned, unknown, and we toyed with whether we should just kind of link these all together with the thought of laying out some project-specific plans there. We backed off of that from a staff perspective because being that there's no development in front of us and no potential plan laid out yet for development of this, to jump to the conclusion of how that might be designed and what our infrastructure costs are is just way too early. I think we want to keep our ability to be really flexible in what we end up doing there from an infrastructure perspective. So we ended up saying, you know, that may be a good standalone one of these someday, but to lump it in now without anything, not even a whisper of potential, just didn't really make a lot of sense to us. And we can debate that with you if you'd like, but that's, I want to let you know that we did give that some thought.
Comments?
Makes sense.
It's a good play. Okay, so I'm gonna make my comments on this one. This is one of the TIF things that I just really hate of what's happened with TIF districts, frankly. This is a company that's located in our village. They're a great community member. They do all the right things. They work with our schools. They just do a wonderful job in our community. And because of the way TIF is, they could go somewhere else. And there's other communities that want them to go there. And it puts us in a spot now where I asked them point blank when we talked, why they came to Waunakee in the first place. All the right reasons, all the good things that you hear about our community, but now based on, you know, the fact that they have shareholders within their company, they have to ask for this because others are willing to give it to them in other communities. So it puts us in a position that our community may say, why are you giving them this tax break? So, although I don't like it, and people in the community will comment that I'll be against a portion of something but still vote for it, that's because there's a big picture you're looking at as opposed to one item within. So there's always going to be things that you might not like about a project, but does the overall totality fit? And in this case, it's hard for me because they don't need the money. And it puts a challenge to me to say yes to this. This isn't a blighted area. This isn't, you know, what TIF was originally intended for. It's very different. It's going to have to meet the but-for test. What is our but-for test really going to look like in this? They won't stay here. Is really the but-for test. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, this is a different situation than a developer. This is not a developer inspired initiative. This is an end user, an industry. Now, this is an industrial district, so it's not a blight district, and we have a different standard here. It has to be suitable for industrial development, and you're promoting it on the basis of not just the tax base, but also the jobs that would be created within the site and within the plant. And so, yes, on a but-for basis, you're looking at what the costs are. You have the ability to ask the industry for their cash flow plan, if you'd like to get into the level of that analysis for their own, from the standpoint of their own internal costs and what have you. But in the case of this particular situation, yes, we have a number of situations where communities with industries have other options, and from a strictly business perspective, they're going to exercise the one that is most cost effective.
The other part is going to tour the facility, and they're a cutting edge, literally, company that does some pretty amazing things. It's hard to potentially lose something like that.
And it's hard to call their bluff, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've discussed this at numerous meetings, and I think, you know, part of the crowd that was here earlier tonight, that's the one difficult part to understand is the competitiveness throughout the communities for companies, and we have a number of them in our village, but companies like Tormac that really, you know, are companies that are doing the right thing and are part of the community. They bring great employees, they expand. You know, those are the ones you can't afford to lose, and that's the tough part of this.
Force has been very successful with their growth and their patterns. You've seen what they're doing for employment base, bringing in workforce right there. It's been a battle for us in Waunakee. We're just a little bit farther off the interstate and the main veins of the arteries for transportation. And in situations like this, sometimes we're twisted a little bit. We have to give a little bit and call their bluff. Or they're going to bring in some creative new options to the community with this, very much so. Might open up conversations for other businesses to come in here as well. So I understand where you're coming from. It's the hardships, and that's the hard part of, this is the negative view from the public for TIF, in my eyes. We're in downtown, I believe it's a little bit different. It's a little positive, and it should be easier for most community members to understand, but it's complicated when you're dealing with finances.
Make a motion.
Brian, do you have any comments first?
Comments?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
And make a motion to approve resolution PCR 18-02 designating proposed boundaries and approving the project plan for TID number 9.
Okay, we've got a motion by Gary,
I'll second it.
second by Brad Zeman. Todd, your hand's up.
Yeah, can I request the modification of the motion to include the change in incentive up to 600,000?
600,000, yes.
Maximum.
Yes.
Or not, you wouldn't state maximum, but, or up to.
Up to.
Okay.
Agreed. Brad?
With the additional value.
Second.
With the additional value. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we got a motion and second. Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, on to the easy stuff. Not really. Let's see here. Discuss and take action on signage for Rainbow Daycare Center. 700 Connery.
Otherwise, we pass it on to Tracy, but it's in your package, though. The signage is pretty straightforward in terms of what they're asking for, and we just want to we'll just ask that the building inspector make sure it complies with our code requirements in terms of size. But staff is supportive and thinks it's thumbs up.
Thanks, Mike.
Right.
See you all next time.
We just need to make sure that that site triangle is met.
Okay.
Hey, where is this plan?
Rainbow?
Yeah.
It's right,
Kilkenny.
it's right
It's,
next to the new,
Kilkenny Commons.
The
Home-
Parkway by
the new
Dealer,
area.
the next building down across the street.
right off Woodland.
Okay. I haven't been to meetings for a while, so I lose track. Sorry about that. I know. I thought I'd pick on me instead of you picking on me.
We appreciate the involvement. Thank you, Mr. McGowan.
Roberta, you can put that Pat McGowan hasn't been at much.
Actually, that makes
It's
the
why,
paper.
it's why we really need members of the public.
With that, Pat's been a longtime member and very valuable to this committee, so thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion on this?
Motion to approve
Oh, there it is, guys.
the signage for the Rainbow Daycare Center at 1100 Connery Cove.
Second.
Motion's been made by Brad Zeman, second by Pat McGowan. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
No.
Fourth item is oh boy, this is gonna be an interesting one. Discussion recommendation on an ordinance to amend our portion of village zoning code to allow tiny houses in an industrial district. Plan Commission will take public comments on the proposed ordinance amendment.
This, Brian had emailed you guys all a copy of the proposed ordinance. There's a hard copy for you. We've had discussions with the Tormac owners. They did ask for a couple changes, which I think are reasonable. But I guess when Brian did the research, looking around what other communities have done throughout really throughout the United States, mostly in California, they tend to set limits in terms of how big these things can be. And then I also suggested we limit the number of these types of units so that they're tied to how big the building is. So if they have a 35,000 square foot building, one per every 2,000 square feet is what he asked for, which might be a little bit on the high end. So that would give them, I think, 17 if my math is right. That might be a little more than I would like to see on a property like this. So, that's certainly the upper limit. Through the conditional use process, you could certainly limit that down. But maybe something like 3,000 square feet would be more reasonable to get it down to 10 or less. So they asked for a change in section B in the definition to go from 400 to 800 square feet. And they did provide me a couple plans from different communities where they seem like a reasonable number. I mean, you're not gonna get much more than a one bedroom with a loft in it, but at 800 square feet. And then the other change is C in the standard. So what I'm recommending is for each 3,000 square feet of the property, that they've allowed to have one tiny house.
Related to the email we got from.
Yeah, they asked for 2,000, I'm recommending 3,000. And then they also just wanted the clarification, which is something we totally support, is it says it has to be on a foundation. Slab on a grade is considered a foundation. So in fact, that would actually be the preference to have these on slab on grade.
So they're movable if we want, if.
To retrofit the
Yes,
site
yes,
later?
they can move them, yeah.
Very easily movable.
It makes it much more movable.
Okay, so the only question I have, Kevin, because it doesn't state it in here, are these considered residential tax? Are they gonna be on the residential taxes, or are they gonna be on the commercial taxes?
That's something the assessor is gonna have to
The
figure
assessment
out.
is on the use.
They won't be separate parcels, though.
Yeah, I suspect that
I'm just, that's why I'm asking the
Yeah.
question. I don't know where it's gonna fit from a taxing perspective.
Yeah, it's likely, since it's an industrial property, that it will be assessed by the state, and so the state's gonna have to make that determination.
My guess, it's their clients, it's a component accessory to their industrial use, not otherwise. So.
Are we, and from the zoning perspective in here, what are they zoned as?
Well, it's
based on this.
still zoned industrial. It just allows, we're changing our code and our light industrial zoning to allow these types of, as an ancillary use to the business as a conditional use. So it's not a permitted use, so they're gonna still have to go through the conditional use process in order to get something like this approved.
Okay, so if we approve this, is this gonna be on a case-by-case basis?
That's the whole idea of conditional uses.
CUP.
It's, yeah, case by case.
And it can be withdrawn if they violate anything.
Yeah, I think we certainly could,
I'm not worried as much about the violation as I am the other businesses that see this. And all of a sudden, they're gonna wanna do this too. Which subverts to a certain degree our housing and market. I'm just,
Well,
I just wanna make sure we're not putting ourselves into something that could potentially lead to things down the road.
So, well, in the ancillary uses, I guess one, if, Nord Gear just wants to put some tiny houses up, it's like, why would you do that? And I know when Tormach was in, they were stating the case as to why tiny houses close by to what they're doing was important to their business. And I guess that's the point that we'd have to make sure we kind of rest on, is that we're allowing it in this case, if we do allow it in this case, because it's important to their business, not just because they, we changed the ordinance and now every, Subtle Strauss and Unique and everybody can put a tiny.
SBL.
Yeah, can put, tiny houses up, so. That seems like why we did it in the first place, was.
yeah, you're right. I think, some of us went into the last plan commission, and you said it, Pat, is, came into the meeting, not necessarily in support of it, but, they certainly made a pretty good presentation and, justification for it. We might be able to start out on a slower, and in fact, they've suggested that. They don't wanna put in 10 or 12 right away. They just like to start with 3 or 4, and maybe that's how we start with them. Just limit it to 4 and see how it goes after a year, and we can decide if they need to expand.
Or
Or
eliminate it. They
Or eliminate
admitted it might not even work.
Yeah, and if I remember, it was directly tied into their innovation and creativity, so it would be project-driven, not providing affordable housing for employees. It was project-driven.
Yep.
So that they could be on the premise, be creative, come and go at the plant. It wasn't a form of subsidized housing.
And how do we monitor that?
So I think that'll be important, so when we get applications and we provide the documentation that this is the justification for approving it. That it was innovative, it's not for affordable housing,
It's project-related, it's production and project-related.
Just subverting.
I think that's a
One guy comes in
critical
for a
piece
project,
there,
it
that
lasts
they really understand that
20
it has to be
years, 30 years.
project-related. Because I think it'd be difficult for some manufacturers to prove that to you, that, I mean, they have a training application there that really brings people in that, it seemed to make sense to me. I'm really, my one comment is concerned about 25 feet high, I wish it was something less than that, and from 400 to 800 feet, 800 feet is, bigger than this room, if you can imagine. I think it's about 34, I've been counting, about 34 by, 25 over that wall, but, I mean, it's bigger than this room almost, the size of that house. One person, it seems like it's so I can see where 400 might be pretty small. Yet, I don't wanna maybe have a latitude in here. These things start to get pretty good size, if you're putting 10 of them down.
And I can elaborate on that as well. If I was a hotelier and I saw this happening in our business park, I'd be so frustrated and I'd turn away and say, what, this happens at one place, it's gonna happen at another. I've owned hotels, I've gone through business parks, and they were a vital part of my business. I had a hotel in Germantown, County Line Road, and we relied extensively off those business parks, those industrial parks. I called on them as one of the owners to say, when you have guests that come into town, you've got engineers, you've got contractors, please stay at my Holiday Inn Express. I'll give you a special rate. That's what we need. We needed that opportunity. And that also then creates room tax. And that's room tax that we could use for tourism for the quilt house, to make it pretty again and do some advertising and marketing. So do I like the concept of it? Does it seem pretty hip and cool? Absolutely. Goes back, don't make them so big that people are gonna get really comfortable. You might find other businesses that are gonna say, hey, that's not being used right now, can I use it for a couple of weeks? Great, yeah, come on down, no problem. Friendly little industrial business park. Who knows, it could go on Airbnb, you don't even know it. I like the idea, but how do you control it in the long run? How do we keep tabs on it? And how do we lure a nice hotelier to come in and say, boy, Waunakee, you deserve a hotel? Even though you've got 40 little small teeny houses next to industrial parks that are taking away any revenue or tax base that we could use here in the village.
So I may have taken us down a rabbit hole here with the start of my discussion, but I'm uncomfortable with this right now, this concept. This was not part of our agreement with TIF, was it? These tiny homes at all? It's completely separate.
Tormach's been clear as they've progressed that this element of their project was critical to their project and could itself be reason to consider other options. Which is why they came in and had a concept discussion with the Plan Commission last month, or 2 months ago, whatever it was, last month.
I'm more concerned about the size, because it seems like that component's changed. It seems now they're not as tiny as I thought they might be, you know?
Now they're
It was-
medium.
When it was like living in a trailer, I thought, well, you know what, that's something, but, 25 foot high, you're gonna have 2 stories, and you're gonna have, a room this big.
It's a 1952 ranch.
It is.
800
You see them all the
square
side on the east side of Madison.
Talk about Waunakee needed affordable housing,
Gregory
that's it.
Street.
Right there.
Yeah, 800 square feet.
800 to 900 square feet.
Yeah. So I'm more comfortable with, maybe 400's unreasonable, but I don't know. I'd feel more comfortable on that smaller size, because I think,
Is there any reason we can't defer this a little bit more? I mean,
Sure.
I'm
No reason at all.
Well, there is, in that Tormach has,
I take that back.
they are,
They haven't started building their building yet.
they haven't, but they've extended their not that they can't get another extension on their contract, but the current contract extension goes to the end of February. And I had to help them, I'd encourage them along with the owner to say, don't be a jerk about this. We're working to come up with a solution for them, and the goal is by the end of February. I thought we had vetted it, well, yeah, you can do whatever you want. I do know that this is a linchpin issue for them, that if this was taken away, they're likely gonna consider other options, according to what they've told me.
but their original request wasn't for 800 square feet, was it?
No, we didn't even get into those.
I don't think we ever
into
got
detail.
into that.
We didn't get
This
into
was
the detail.
discussion of a tiny house, which I agree 800 is.
I mean, the concept, I think, I like the concept because it's something different, and I like their purpose for it. I think it's an ideal purpose for this kind of on-site housing, yet the scale of it, I just think is too large. And I don't know if they've requested 800 square
Well,
feet.
we have a special meeting on the 29th, and I was hoping that they'd be here to help with this discussion. Because I think I heard some good points regarding the size of this, how it's gotta be related to the business. how
It's
we may need to-
monitored.
We need to be able to take some time and be able to maybe offer some language that would support that, so that, you can't just do it for reasons other than trying to avoid staying in a hotel. Because I thought they made some compelling arguments that it was for innovative, they work 20 hours a day, sleep 4 hours a night, so they just sleep, on site, and they wake up in the middle of the night and they go work on something else what they're doing inside the shop.
Do we have any of these in Madison at all, in the scientific research park or anything?
No, but
They're gonna have that same kind of thing, where
they
they're bringing
were-
people in.
They were considering over at the renovation of the seed building at Olbert Gardens. They're considering about 20 of them there. I don't know what this current status is.
Is that for workforce housing, or is that just for their teeny home developments?
That was a combination of,
That's what I thought.
no, it was for food production, and it was, no, it was to promote food production and, and serve tourism as well. It wasn't a social program.
Okay.
I mean, I know one of their comments was that our hotel doesn't suit their needs for what they have, that we currently have.
It's not just, I don't just hear that from
I know,
them.
I know, but to Brad's point, are we gonna limit our potential to lure that other? Sorry. If we approve this, I don't know. I have my concerns.
It goes back to what happens if the Salvation Army wants to come here and buy a commercial lot, put up a nice building, use it as a canteen, traffic area, and in the end, they say we're gonna put some teeny homes behind it. What says they can't do it and they can?
The CUP process does.
What's that?
You have discretion, the CUP, entirely.
I just worry about a hotelier coming in or wanting to come in and they see this, and they're gonna wave a yellow flag going, warning. The hotel in town's not already doing well, and you see it, and there's particular reasons for that, but we want somebody of quality to come in here, and they see that, and I'm doing my studies, my market studies, and I'm seeing what the village is allowing these people to do, taking potentially 5, 6 room nights out of the market a week for a hotelier not to make revenue, when it's just as easy to go to Middleton or go to the north side of Madison. There are a lot of hotels 15 minutes away that are of high quality.
So what was the maximum they were gonna propose? Did they ever commit to that number? How many, the 10, 12, 20,
Yeah, you know, they were asking for is up to 16 or 17.
16 or 17?
They did?
Well, that's what they're, based on the square footage.
That's not what anybody was envisioning when we discussed it at concept.
Well, but to Brad's point, if they commit to 80%, 15 units a year, 80% out of a 50-room boutique hotel, it's a pretty sweet deal.
Yep.
But they can't go in their bedroom slippers to the shop, you know, I get that part.
Well, wouldn't have probably have thought that'd be the most difficult issue as
Yeah, here it is.
reared its head for tonight's meeting, but
We talked
everybody's
about
looking at me, I know for me to.
You know, the
match
idea,
that.
when they came in was that it was, they had a unique need for this outside of the things we're thinking about. I don't know how we make sure they understand this really needs to be unique. And is it such a unique need that you gotta build 14 of them at 1,800 square, or 800 square feet? That's a tiny subdivision.
Well, that's
You know,
what, I mean, you start, I think
So,
it's comparison.
so to kind of say, to go back to them and say, guys, what is it, you know, Plan Commission's pushing back. What is it you're really trying to do? You know, all of a sudden, we've went from, you know, a tiny home that I thought was not even 400 feet. Yeah, a few
And
tiny
one or
homes
two
to
of
try it out, that were gonna be a couple hundred feet, that, you know, size of a trailer, that if it didn't work, they sell to some employee to pull up to their, you know, hunting lodge someplace. That's what, when it first started, now all of a sudden, we're talking, you know,
But you
one
need to
every.
give us some insight here. What are we missing from them?
1, 2,
Todd's saying
3,
this is a linchpin of the
I
deal.
look at it, you wanna make it small enough that it's uncomfortable for the stay for 2 or 3 nights, but comfortable enough to stay for 1 night. When you're tired and you've worked since 10:30 to 10:30 and you're,
They said their expectation was somebody who'd come here and spend month, if not months.
People training, yeah,
Could be a
people that would
couple-
train on this.
Yeah, they come and perfect their trade.
for them, look at the revenue they're gonna save. Oh my gosh, that's,
Well, I think, you know.
I was a hotelier and I thrived on that. I thrived on those businesses growing and those long-term stays, and we'd give them a special rate of $49 a night to stay for every night for 3 months. It was a big part of our business.
I think for their businesses, maybe some of the people they're dealing with, it might be a small independent business guy or maybe a high school teacher or somebody who, you know, can't afford maybe it's an $80 a night room for 3 weeks. That's, I think, maybe the thing they run into a little bit.
In their illustration, they only show 10.
Yeah, I think Kevin, to take it down to,
Well, you can even, I mean, I think we should have some further discussions with them. I think we need to share with them what your concerns are and to see if there's another way of coming at this. We got a special meeting on the 29th. This gives us a chance to, rather than try and make a hasty decision tonight, let's have a conversation, let's get them at the meeting on the 29th, and we'll just have to see if we can work through it between now and then, in terms of what your concerns are.
I mean, I can't, just think of a 25-foot building that's as big as this room. I mean, it's gonna be a Madison East Side house. It is.
That's an Oscar Mayer workforce housing right
You
there.
go right there, that's 800
I mean,
square
so you
feet.
want, we've been begging for affordable housing in Waunakee. There's our solution right there.
So, you know, if they would take this maybe down and scale it.
Well, I'm just saying, that's what people are gonna look at. They're
And
gonna say,
limit
what,
the
like,
number.
if those are gonna do 8, 10 homes right there behind their business, why can't we do 8, 10 homes right over here that same way?
Okay, we're gonna defer this to the next meeting. Is everybody good with that?
29th, yeah.
29th?
All right.
Okay. Last, we've got our Waunakee Westport Joint Plan Commission items. We've got public hearing and discussion action on certified survey map and rezone 5683 Harbert Road. Kevin?
Yeah, it's really a Westport issue. I couldn't come up with anything in terms of it impacting the village. Tom Molson put together the memo to go along with it, and certainly he went into great detail on what they're proposing. So my recommendation is that we defer to Westport on this.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay, then the initial consultation, Burning rezone request, 80 acres northwest State Highway. We knew this one was coming.
Yeah, we heard this at the public hearing and when we made the zoning changes. And, you know, just a little bit of background. The Brynick property, 8 acres, was brought into the urban, not into urban service area, but into our comprehensive plan as an area to be developed. And under that scenario, they're not entitled to the farmland tax credits. For them to be entitled for the farmland tax credits, they need to be zoned exclusive and not be within our comprehensive plan for development. And they also have to be in the Dane County's preservation land, which seems reasonable. And so they were gonna, we suspect they're gonna make the change to withdraw from the change to zoning and then withdraw their expansion from the comprehensive plan. And we tend to, you know, defer to property owners on what their intention is. One concern that Brian raised, and there's a state statute that says that it may limit our ability in terms of changing our comprehensive plan if it's inconsistent with the Dane County Preservation Plan. Well, we've talked to Dane County. It's certainly their practice. They don't believe in stopping or preventing communities from changing their comprehensive plan and taking things out of the preservation. That's the understanding now. It's been their practice now. Brian suggested that we want to pursue this, that we get a 4-party agreement, simple. Everybody's on the same page on this. The Bryans agreed that at some point it could come into the comprehensive plan, and the Dane County agrees, and the village agrees, and the town agrees. And we just, then that issue goes away in terms of bringing it back in at some point.
So what do we need our members to know before they get
It's a
there?
consultation, so I think they can share that same comments tomorrow night.
Can you provide those comments so they have it accurate, what you
Yeah.
just said about Brian's?
I'll be there.
Is the agreement
Send them an email?
drafted
Just
already,
kind of an
or-
email stating what
There's
you're,
no agreement drafted.
Oh, would that be
No.
helpful?
No, I don't think we want to go that far. I think it's still just an initial consultation, so they're not taking any action. All they're doing is hearing from the Brynics. I assume that they're going to show up, and then we give them some feedback, and then I think Brian, Tom, and I can work out an agreement for all
do they have the
purposes.
ability to make decisions tomorrow night on that topic?
They do not.
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, motion been made and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Say their position on.
Our longest meeting.
Longest meeting in a long time.